The stars shone brightly over the vast emptiness of space, and Earth sat quietly beneath the gaze of 100 warships that had crossed galaxies to arrive at its doorstep, a place once thought to be too insignificant for anyone of power to bother with. But that was before the Galactic Empire set its eyes on it. Earth stood on the edge of a new era as the Empire's fleet loomed above its atmosphere, and the first signal was sent, a demand for surrender, simple and clear. And then the Empire waited with the confidence of 1,000 victories, stretching across countless worlds. In every direction they had come to take control of this world, a world that had never known their kind, and one they thought would submit without hesitation. But something unexpected happened as the message broadcasted across the planet. The people of Earth did not cower, they did not cry out in fear, they laughed. The laughter was heard from every corner of the globe, from the largest cities to the smallest villages, from crowded street corners to quiet countryside homes. It spread like wildfire through the communication networks, and all across the planet the laughter continued echoing into space. It reached the Imperial fleet and bounced back through their comm systems. A strange, distorted sound they had not anticipated. It was not fear or pleading, it was not a message of submission, it was human laughter. And in that laughter was something deeper, something that resonated far beyond the expected response. It was defiance, it was confusion, it was mockery, and it made the Empire's generals uneasy. General Jurian, the leader of the Imperial fleet, watched the transmission from his flagship, his face twisted in disbelief. How could such a primitive species respond like this to his demands? A species so far beneath the Empire's notice had dared to mock them. He clenched his fists and stared out across the dark expanse of space as his ships hung in orbit above Earth's blue surface. The nerve of these humans was astounding. They did not know the power of the Empire. They had no idea what was coming for them. And yet they laughed at the very idea of submission. What kind of beings were these humans? He had expected them to cower as so many others had done before them. The Empire's message had been clear. Earth would kneel and the Empire would expand its reach even further. This planet would be the next conquest in the Empire's never-ending campaign for dominance. But the humans had turned it all on its head. They had not only rejected the message, but had done so in the most humiliating way possible. Their laughter was more than just an insult. It was a statement of defiance. They were not afraid, and they were not ready to submit, and that made the Empire uneasy. Jurian's voice cracked through the comm system once again, ordering his fleet into position. He would not be mocked. He would show these humans the price of disrespect. The fleet began to move into formation above Earth, and the ships deployed their landing forces beneath the dark shadows of the Empire's mighty vessels. The first wave of soldiers descended like a dark cloud over Earth's cities. Their mission was simple: land, take control, and subjugate every living human they found below. But what awaited them would be far more complicated than anyone had imagined. As they began to land on the planet's surface, they were unaware of what would greet them in this strange world of defiant laughter and unexpected surprises. As the Empire's soldiers descended toward Earth's surface, their boots touched ground in cities across the world. Their mission was clear: overpower, subdue, and assert the Empire's will. Yet the humans offered no immediate resistance, no large-scale armies waiting to charge them, no highly advanced weapons aimed at their ships. Instead, what greeted the Empire was a quiet, eerie calm. At first the soldiers wondered if the humans had already surrendered and decided not to engage the fleet. But as they ventured deeper into the cities, their confusion only grew. The people of Earth didn't look scared, they looked perplexed. Many stood and watched as the soldiers passed them by. Some even waved or shrugged in amusement. But not a single person showed fear, even when the Empire's ships hovered overhead and soldiers stormed the streets. Something else entirely unfolded beneath the surface. The humans were simply waiting their time had come. Back in the sky, the Imperial fleet hovered confidently, waiting for the signal to begin their full assault. The fleet commanders believed they had already won. They thought that Earth's lack of technology would be its undoing, but they underestimated the creativity of the human spirit. The Empire's warships were designed to overwhelm and destroy anything in their path. They were powerful and efficient, but they were also predictable, and their commanders were used to enemies who followed the same rules of battle. The Empire had conquered entire civilizations with sheer force and superior technology, but the humans of Earth were not like the others. They were stubborn, unpredictable, and their ingenuity knew no bounds. As night fell across Earth, something began to stir beneath the quiet surface. Humanity was not idle. The planet's leaders had not surrendered. They had rallied to the cause. The ancient warships from Earth's past began to come alive. The machines of old, the relics from a bygone era, were far from obsolete to the humans. They were the keys to their survival. Ships from World War II, weathered yet functional, started to rise from hidden hangars and underground bases. Long forgotten test ships, once dismissed as impractical, now saw their first light of battle. The Empire's fleet had no idea what was about to hit them. As the first human ships launched into space, the Empire's advanced scanners locked onto them and dismissed them as relics from an old, forgotten age. But the humans had learned to use what they had at hand. Their craft were small and slow by Imperial standards, but they were maneuverable, unpredictable, and they knew the land. They fought for Earth, and they had something the Empire's fleet could not understand: a desperation and will to fight that no advanced technology could calculate. The first human ship appeared from the dark abyss of space, a modified aircraft carrier from Earth's mid-20th century. It was outdated, clunky, and its weapons were primitive compared to the Empire's arsenal, but the humans aboard knew exactly what they were doing. As they moved to engage the closest Imperial destroyer, they didn't follow the traditional tactics the Empire was used to. They didn't form neat lines or keep to expected formations. They didn't care about the Empire's so-called superiority. They used the ship's clunky design to their advantage, using every twist and turn to avoid incoming fire and fire back at odd angles. They moved erratically, like a swarm of angry hornets circling their prey. This was not the battle the Empire had prepared for, and it rattled their confidence. As the human ships clashed with the Empire's fleets, the commanders of the Imperial fleet couldn't believe their eyes. Their ships were firing relentlessly at what appeared to be outdated rust buckets, but the human vessels were dodging missiles with uncanny precision. Their movements made no sense. It was like fighting against shadows, like fighting against something unpredictable, something that refused to follow the rules. The humans didn't fight with strength. They fought with cunning and resourcefulness, and the first battle against the Empire's mighty fleet was proving to be far from the easy victory they had expected. The battle had erupted with an intensity that no one could have predicted, least of all the Imperial commanders. As the ancient human warships danced erratically around the sleek, formidable destroyers of the Empire, a strange sense of unease began to spread through the ranks of the invading fleet. The human ships, seemingly outdated and barely capable of spaceflight, were proving far more troublesome than the Empire had anticipated. General Jurian's fleet had anticipated an easy conquest, but now they were tangled in a fight they could not understand. The first human ship to engage the Empire's destroyers, an old carrier from Earth's Second World War, had already made a mockery of the Empire's advanced weaponry. The Empire's missiles, precise and destructive, locked onto the target with deadly accuracy. But time and time again, the human ship executed sudden, evasive maneuvers, its engines screeching as it swerved and dove in impossible directions. Each missile streaked past, missing by mere meters, as the humans seemed to anticipate the Empire's every move. Inside the ship, Captain Sarah Bell, an experienced fighter pilot turned commander, grinned as she issued orders to her crew. They had no shields, no advanced lasers, no hyper-efficient engines, but they had something far more powerful, an unyielding drive to survive. They knew their ship inside and out, every creak of the hull, every quirk in the engine's rhythm. They had trained for years, preparing for the moment when they would face overwhelming odds. And now, that moment had arrived. "Steady," Belle muttered to herself as her fingers danced over the controls. "They'll never expect this." A quick shift of the throttle sent the carrier into a roll, narrowly dodging a barrage of Imperial laser fire. The human ship broke formation, cutting across the Empire's fleet like a mad bull charging through a group of trained stallions. The enemy fleet had grown used to facing opponents who adhered to predictable patterns, military doctrine, strict formations, well-practiced strikes. But the humans weren't playing by those rules. They fought like wild cards, like animals desperate to escape a hunter. And in that chaos, they had found an advantage. Across the battlefield, other human ships joined the fray, each one as unpredictable as the last. An old nuclear bomber, stripped of its payload but fitted with makeshift guns, darted between the enemy cruisers. A converted mining vessel, retrofitted with crude but effective weaponry, slammed into the hull of a nearby Imperial destroyer, unleashing a volley of rockets that forced the enemy to scatter. The Empire's weapons were strong, but they were designed for battles where the enemy fought in an orderly, predictable manner. Against these relentless, unpredictable humans, their precision turned into a disadvantage. Back on the flagship, General Jurian was beginning to lose patience. His fleet was supposed to be unbeatable, yet these humans, with their primitive, haphazard ships, were doing the unthinkable. They were winning. Every time the Empire's soldiers locked onto a human vessel, it seemed to vanish in a blur, only to reappear somewhere else, infuriatingly out of range. The humans were everywhere, yet nowhere at once. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors, like creatures who would never back down, no matter the odds. "Focus fire," Jurian ordered, his voice crackling with frustration. "Destroy everything. Leave no survivors." But his orders only added to the confusion. Human tactics were not like any the Empire had faced before. The Imperial fleet's high-tech weaponry was designed to eradicate, to wipe out entire fleets with a single decisive blow. But the humans were not just using their weapons, they were using their minds. They were adapting, countering every move the Empire made, shifting from one strategy to another at a moment's notice. The Empire's destroyers, capable of annihilating entire planets, were now struggling to land a single blow on a target that wouldn't sit still. On Earth's surface, the humans watched from their homes, their eyes wide in awe and excitement. For the first time in centuries, they saw their world's fate hanging in the balance, and they were not afraid. No one knew where this battle would lead, but it was clear that the humans had something more valuable than mere firepower: the relentless will to protect their home. The first skirmish ended with an unexpected twist. The Empire, despite its superior strength and advanced technology, was forced to retreat. They had underestimated the most dangerous aspect of humanity: their unpredictability, their resourcefulness, and their refusal to accept defeat. And as the Imperial fleet withdrew, the humans stood tall, not in victory, but in defiance. Earth would not go quietly into the night. The Empire would have to fight for every inch. The retreat of the Imperial fleet was a momentary lapse in their domination, and the generals on board the massive ships could not believe their sensors. The humans had no shields, no advanced weapons, no ships of the same caliber. But they had something far worse for the Empire: an uncanny resilience. General Jurian's eyes burned with frustration as he watched his forces regroup. Every time they tried to take control, these humans found new ways to defy them. It was not what the Empire had prepared for, and it was starting to make the once invincible commanders question their own tactics. But one thing was clear: the humans' victory over the first wave of the fleet would not be enough to stop the Empire. They were merely delaying the inevitable. Jurian's voice rang out across the command deck, cold and decisive. "Prepare for the next phase," he commanded, his tone sharp. "Deploy the full force. These humans will bow before the Empire." Below the massive warships, a second wave of soldiers began to descend toward Earth's surface. This time, Jurian wasn't making the same mistake. He ordered his fleet to concentrate their firepower, keeping the humans' forces pinned down while his ground forces secured the major cities. His soldiers would land with overwhelming force, and the humans would have no choice but to submit. They had no resources left to fight, no means of escaping the Empire's might. He was certain of it. But once again, the Empire underestimated its opponent. What they didn't know was that humanity had spent the last few days preparing, not for surrender, but for something far more dangerous. In the aftermath of the first skirmish, human leaders had come together, not in despair, but in action. Earth's military, once seen as obsolete by many in the galaxy, had rallied under the banner of survival. Cities once thought too primitive to be of any strategic value had transformed into fortresses. The people of Earth, from every walk of life, began to contribute in ways the Empire never expected. The warships, the bombers, and even the smallest personal crafts were adapted and reinforced. All across the globe, Earth's resources were being marshaled, not just for defense, but for resistance. From deep within Earth's subterranean bunkers, old weapons were unearthed, dusted off, and repurposed. Tanks from the past, once written off as ancient relics, were fitted with reverse-engineered pieces of Imperial technology. Humans were scavengers, turning the seemingly useless into the unexpected. Their ingenuity was no longer a side note to the war. It was their greatest weapon. The second wave of the Empire's invasion began with the deployment of highly trained stormtroopers and heavy-duty mechs, landing with the expectation that the humans had no organized resistance left. They expected to find panic, fear, and a swift submission. But when they hit Earth's surface, they were met with something they hadn't prepared for: the element of surprise. In the sprawling city of New York, the Empire's mechs landed first, their heavy feet pounding into the concrete streets. As they advanced, they were met with small, almost laughable resistance, seemingly unarmed civilians standing in the way. But then, in an instant, the ground erupted beneath them. From hidden traps beneath the streets, human-engineered explosives shot up, engulfing the mechs in flames. The Empire's mechs, though formidable, were not prepared for the guerrilla tactics of a civilization fighting for its very existence. Meanwhile, in the skies above, more human craft, small, nimble ships and modified fighters, dove in and out of the larger Imperial vessels, using terrain and speed to their advantage. The Empire had expected direct confrontations, but the humans weren't playing by those rules. They attacked in bursts, relying on swift, evasive maneuvers and cunning tactics to avoid the Empire's laser beams and missiles. On the ground, the Empire's soldiers struggled to keep up with the relentless onslaught. Their armor was strong, but they were now facing a war they did not understand. Humans did not fight for power or dominance. They fought for survival, for the home they had lived on for millennia. Each of them had something to protect: their families, their homes, their future. That made them a force far more dangerous than any advanced weapon could account for. As the battle raged on, the Imperial commanders began to realize the mistake they had made. They had thought Earth would be an easy target, that their superior technology would win the day. But in every corner of the world, in every city, in every rural town, the humans were fighting back, not with might, but with ingenuity and an unbreakable will. The Empire's mistake was simple. They had underestimated the one thing that no technology could measure: human spirit. The realization began to settle in, slowly at first, then with growing intensity. The Empire's ground forces, despite their technological superiority, were being outmaneuvered and outthought at every turn. The highly trained Imperial soldiers, equipped with the latest in energy shields and plasma rifles, found themselves constantly battling against an invisible force, something they couldn't quantify or predict. The humans were not just fighting back with their weapons or their tactics, they were fighting with their minds. Every obstacle the Empire put in their path seemed to be met with an unexpected counterattack. Every advantage the Empire tried to leverage was nullified by the sheer unpredictability of the humans. It wasn't just in the cities. Across Earth, in dense forests, rugged mountain ranges, and vast deserts, humans were adapting. Human resistance groups formed almost overnight, each taking on different forms. Some groups set up ambushes, hiding in the thick underbrush, while others repurposed old military vehicles to launch guerrilla attacks on the Empire's supply lines. Underground bunkers, once used to store supplies from a time long past, became the epicenter of human ingenuity. From these hidden havens, small teams of engineers, Soldiers and civilians began to reverse engineer the stolen technology they had acquired, piecing together alien weapons and vehicles in an effort to level the playing field. In the skies, Earth's makeshift Air Force, a patchwork of old military jets and fighter planes, began to fly in coordinated attacks, striking from angles that the Empire's ships couldn't predict. These human pilots, though not as technologically advanced as the Empire's officers, had something else: experience. They knew the land below and the terrain around them better than any Imperial fleet commander could hope to understand. The Empire's warships, with their vast firepower, were great at dominating space. But on Earth, the humans were learning to use every corner, every rock and cliff, to outmaneuver the Empire's high-tech sensors and strike when least expected. The true turning point came when Earth's engineers managed to reverse engineer one of the Empire's captured warships. The technology, once thought to be years ahead of anything humanity could even imagine, was now in their hands. A group of daring human engineers, led by the brilliant and eccentric Dr. Emily Hart, took the captured ship apart piece by piece. What they discovered was staggering. The Empire's ships were powerful, yes, but they were not invulnerable. They had weaknesses, flaws in their designs that, if exploited, could turn the tide of battle in favor of the humans. Using this knowledge, they began to create weapons that could pierce the Empire's shields and disrupt their advanced systems. The first successful strike came without warning. A human fighter, equipped with a weapon based on the reverse-engineered technology, launched a direct hit on an Imperial destroyer. The blast sent shockwaves through the Imperial fleet, and for the first time, the Empire felt the sting of a blow they hadn't seen coming. The destroyer's shields flared and flickered, then collapsed entirely as the human weapon tore into its hull. The explosion that followed was catastrophic, taking out an entire squadron of Imperial ships that had been in formation. This single, seemingly insignificant attack sent a ripple of panic through the Imperial ranks. Back in the heart of the Empire's fleet, General Jurian paced furiously on the command deck of his flagship. The humans, those primitive creatures who should have bowed before the Empire, had once again defied every expectation. This new weapon, this breakthrough, had changed everything. It was no longer a question of merely winning. It was a question of survival. The tide of the battle had shifted, and the Empire, once so sure of its supremacy, now found itself fighting a desperate war against an opponent who refused to be crushed. Across Earth, the human forces felt the shift too. The reverse-engineered weapon had proven that the Empire's technology was not as invincible as they had thought. Now, more than ever, the people of Earth were united in their resolve to stand against the Empire. Their laughter, once a mockery of the Empire's demands, now echoed as a symbol of defiance. The Empire, which had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, was now facing a rebellion like no other. The humans were not going to let their world fall. They were fighting not just for their homes, but for their future, for the very spirit of humanity. As the first victory rang out, the Empire realized with growing dread that the humans had become something they could no longer ignore. They had evolved from a broken civilization into a united force, a force that would no longer bow, no longer surrender. The battle was no longer about military might. It was about the unstoppable will of a people determined to survive. The human resistance was no longer just a movement. It had become a full-scale revolution. Earth, once divided by borders and ideologies, had united under the pressure of the Empire's invasion. Cities that had once been disconnected now worked together, sharing resources and intelligence, coordinating strikes against the Imperial forces with incredible precision. Human ingenuity was on display at every turn, as Earth's defenders found new ways to exploit the weaknesses of the Empire's technology, even as their forces grew more desperate. The Empire's generals, shaken by their earlier losses, knew they could not afford to underestimate humanity any longer. What had started as an invasion, a quick annexation of a primitive world, was now a brutal, prolonged war. General Jurian, once confident in the overwhelming superiority of the Empire, stood at the helm of a fleet that was increasingly outmatched by the humans' unpredictable tactics and growing technological innovations. His fleet, now scattered and losing ships, had become a shadow of its former strength. Yet, the Empire was not ready to admit defeat. It had conquered hundreds of worlds, and Earth would be no different. The humans had shown resilience, but the Empire had the power to obliterate entire civilizations. With that thought, Jurian issued his most drastic order yet. The Empire would no longer rely on surgical strikes or skirmishes. They would use their full might. Earth would be brought to its knees, and its people would have no choice but to submit. The general called for the deployment of the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Dreadstar. The Dreadstar was a weapon of unimaginable power, a ship capable of destroying entire planets. Jurian knew it was a risk. Launching such a weapon could draw the attention of other galactic civilizations, and the political ramifications of using it were enormous. But the Empire's pride could not be shattered. Earth's defiance, its resilience, needed to be crushed immediately before the entire galaxy began to question the Empire's strength. The Dreadstar would erase all hope. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Resistance had caught wind of the Empire's plans. A team of the most skilled spies and engineers, led by Dr. Emily Hart, had intercepted communications from the Empire, revealing the imminent deployment of the Dreadstar. The discovery sent shockwaves through Earth's leadership. The humans knew that their window of opportunity was closing. They had to stop the Empire before the Dreadstar arrived, before the war could be decided by a single catastrophic strike. Dr. Hart and her team worked tirelessly, knowing that time was running out. The human resistance had grown in strength, but their numbers were still small compared to the might of the Empire. The human fleet, though larger now, was still no match for the Empire's warships. The only chance for success lay in a desperate gamble. The engineers who had been reverse engineering Imperial technology had uncovered a key vulnerability in the Empire's ships, something that, if exploited correctly, could disable the Dreadstar itself. It was risky, dangerous, and the odds of success were slim, but it was their only hope. The plan was set into motion. A team of elite human soldiers, led by Captain Sarah Bell, was tasked with boarding the Dreadstar before it could reach Earth and launching a full-scale assault on the Imperial vessel. The humans had no illusions about the difficulty of the mission. They knew the Dreadstar was equipped with some of the Empire's most advanced defenses, but they also knew that this was not just another battle. This was the turning point. If they could stop the Dreadstar, they would send a clear message to the Empire that no matter how powerful they would never crush humanity's spirit. The humans did not fear the Empire's power. They feared nothing but losing their freedom, their home, and the future of their children. And so they prepared for the mission with everything they had. Every soldier, every pilot, every engineer was ready to give their all in a final desperate effort to protect their world. The Dreadstar was on its way, its engines burning with the intensity of a supernova. Time was running out, and the stakes had never been higher. The Empire's final weapon was within striking distance, but humanity's final stand had just begun. The moment the human forces learned of the Dreadstar's approach, a silence fell over the command centers. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Everyone knew what was at stake. Dr. Emily Hart, Captain Sarah Bell, and the Resistance leaders had spent hours in quiet, tense strategy sessions, running through every possible scenario. The Empire's final weapon was on its way, and it would wipe out Earth in a single decisive strike if they couldn't stop it. The plan was daring, and the chances of success were slim, but the humans had no choice. The only way to take down the Dreadstar was from the inside. A group of the best pilots, soldiers, and engineers would board the colossal ship using a fleet of makeshift shuttles, infiltrate its defenses, and disable its weapon systems. The Empire would never expect it, not when Earth's forces were still fighting with ships scavenged from decades past. "Remember," Captain Bell said, her voice steady and calm despite the enormity of the task ahead. We're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting for our world. We're going to take that thing down, and we're going to do it together. Stay focused, stay sharp, and we'll make it." The human fleet, now fully united and battle-hardened after weeks of fighting back against the Empire's superior forces, launched their assault. Hundreds of small, nimble fighter crafts, retrofitted with stolen Imperial technology and makeshift weapons, flew toward the massive Dreadstar. As they approached, the enormity of the Empire's weapon became apparent. The ship was a floating fortress, capable of destroying an entire planet with its immense firepower. Its shields, nearly indestructible by conventional weapons, glowed a violent red as it powered up for the final assault. But the human fighters did not flinch. They knew they had no choice but to engage. They were outmatched in terms of firepower and technology, but they had one thing the Empire could never understand: determination. These humans weren't fighting for conquest or power. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and the future of their kind. As the human fleet engaged the Dreadstar's outer defenses, the resistance shuttles made their move. A squadron of engineers and soldiers, led by Captain Bell herself, piloted their crafts directly toward the Dreadstar. They evaded laser fire and missile launches with desperate precision, weaving through a storm of Imperial fire like a school of fish darting through a net. They were fast, unrelenting, and their tactics had become impossible for the Empire's fleet to predict. The first shuttle, an old transport retrofitted with explosives, slipped past the Empire's defenses. Bell's voice crackled over the comms. "We've made it to the docking bay. Hold tight, team," she said, her voice unshakable. "Once we're inside, we're moving fast. There's no time to waste." As the shuttle landed on the Dreadstar, the doors opened, and Bell's team stormed the ship's hull. Armed with stolen Imperial weapons, they fought their way through the ship's defenses, bypassing security checkpoints and outsmarting the automated sentries. Inside, the Empire's soldiers were taken by surprise. There was no grand battle, just the shock and fury of a team that had nothing to lose. As they pressed forward, Dr. Hart's engineers worked tirelessly, using their knowledge of the Empire's technology to disable the Dreadstar's power grid. They hacked into the ship's core, using an old virus the humans had developed from the Empire's own systems, designed to cripple the ship's central operating system. Every second counted. The Empire's forces were closing in, and soon the Dreadstar's superweapon would be ready to fire. The ship rumbled as the resistance team reached the heart of the Dreadstar. Bell stood at the entrance of the main chamber, her heart pounding. "This is it," she said, staring down at the control panel. She knew that one wrong move, one mistake, could mean the end of everything. But there was no going back now. They were moments away from either victory or extinction. The countdown to the Dreadstar's activation was ticking down, and only one side would survive. The final strike would come down to these humans, this one small, defiant force that had already proven that nothing, not even the might of the Empire, could ever break their spirit. The control room of the Dreadstar was a stark metallic chamber, humming with the low sound of impending destruction. Captain Sarah Bell and her team stood at the heart of the Empire's greatest weapon, the throbbing pulse of the ship's countdown echoing in their ears. They were inside, but they weren't safe, not by a long shot. Time was slipping away faster than they could think, and the consequences of failure were beyond imagining. The countdown to the Dreadstar's devastating planetary weapon was relentless. It had only minutes left before Earth would be obliterated in a single catastrophic blast. The humans had no more time for mistakes, no room for hesitation. Every move had to be perfect, every action precise. Bell looked over to Dr. Emily Hart, who was furiously typing away at the ship's control terminal, her fingers moving faster than anyone would have thought possible. "We've got to hurry, Emily," Bell said, her voice tight with urgency. The pressure of the moment was overwhelming, but she couldn't afford to show fear. They had come too far. "I know," Dr. Hart replied, her voice sharp with determination. "The virus is working. It's breaching their system, but their security protocols are locking us out. We almost got it, just a few more seconds." The Dread Star shook violently as the Empire's remaining forces realized what was happening. The ship's defensive systems began to reconfigure, triggering an alert across the vessel. Bell could hear the loudspeaker blaring through the halls, announcing the imminent threat to the Empire. It was a race against time now. If the Empire could reinforce the ship's core before the virus fully disabled it, the Dread Star would fire. "Team, get ready," Bell ordered, her voice unwavering. "We're not just shutting it down. We're going to make sure it can never fire again." As the virus began to corrupt the ship's control systems, the once pristine, controlled environment of the Dread Star started to collapse. The lights flickered as security alarms sounded, the air heavy with the tension of impending chaos. But the humans were undeterred. They moved swiftly, pushing forward through the corridors toward the ship's core. Every second mattered. The last line of defense, the Empire's elite guards, stood in their way. They were heavily armored and armed with plasma rifles, but they had never faced an enemy like the humans, fueled by desperation, hope, and the sheer will to survive. Captain Bell's team fought like they had nothing to lose, attacking with precision and ferocity. It was a battle of endurance, a fight not for glory, but for the very survival of their world. "Keep moving," Bell shouted, as she and her team engaged in the fierce firefight. They fought not with the intention to kill, but with the drive to clear a path to the heart of the ship. Each strike was calculated, each move a necessary step toward disabling the Dread Star once and for all. Meanwhile, Dr. Hart was still at the terminal, hacking into the final layers of the system. Sweat streamed down her face as the ship's countdown reached its final moments. Her fingers danced over the controls, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. "I've got it," she yelled, as the final block of the system fell. The virus had completed its mission. The Dread Star's core was now under their control. The weapon systems, once unstoppable, were now crippled, rendered useless. The lights of the Dread Star flickered one final time before they went dark. The ship shook violently as its power grid collapsed, and with that, the countdown came to an abrupt halt. The Dread Star's deadly energy cannon, poised to destroy Earth, now sat idle and powerless. "We did it," Bell said, her voice hoarse, as her team regrouped. The ship was falling apart around them, but they had succeeded. They had saved their world. But even as they stood victorious, the war was far from over. The Dread Star's failure was a monumental blow to the Empire, but the Empire's pride would not be so easily broken. The fleet, still massive and dangerous, would retaliate. Earth had earned the Empire's wrath. Bell turned to her team, her expression resolute. "We've won this battle," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "But the war isn't over. We're not done yet." With the Dread Star now neutralized, the human resistance had delivered the first major blow to the Empire's vast war machine. But this victory would ignite a firestorm across the galaxy. The humans had proven that, against all odds, they could take on an empire that spanned the stars. And now, more than ever, the galaxy would know that humanity, resilient, relentless, and united, would never be subdued. The war was just beginning, and humanity would fight on, one victory at a time.